contestants at the World Economic Forum, and I'm delighted to welcome you today to talk about how we try to solve the wildfire problem. We know that it's endemic across the world and it's getting worse with the various aspects of climate change. And what we need are tools that we can use in regard to prediction of wildfires. One of the things that we've been doing over the past 1 year is working with some of our partners at the World Economic Forum, governments, non-profits, NGOs, companies and academics, to produce tools that predict where wildfires are going to occur. One of the things that we'll be talking about today is that wildfires occur both from geological conditions, weather conditions, but also sometimes humans either deliberately or accidentally set fires. So working with one of our partners based in Turkey, we have produced an algorithm which is now open source, which predicts where a wildfire will start within a 24-hour window, so that fire services can actually go to the place and we can clear the biological material which would enable the wildfire to continue and spread. So this algorithm at the moment has a precision recall accuracy of 80% for live fires and 50% for of problems that actually don't develop into wildfires. We have still work to do, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about. What's the future for this work, which needs to be done globally? So today with me, I am joined by Cathy Foley, who is the Chief Scientist of Australia, and Carlos Afonso Nobre, who is a senior researcher at the Institute of Advanced Studies in the University of São Paulo, Brazil, and co-chair of the science panel for the Amazon. So, turning first to you, Carlos, the Amazon, we know, is a critical area for wildfires, and I talked a little bit about human setting of wildfires. So can you help us with, in the Amazon, are you seeing more human fires, or are they mainly caused, for example, by lightning strikes that we see around the world?
Good morning to all. Thank you very much. I think, when you invite me to this session, I said, well, artificial intelligence might be very important because I will place some of the challenges. Unlike most biomes on the planet, mid-latitude forests, grasslands, tropical savannas, tropical forests are the only biome in which the ecological evolution over tens of millions of years did not allow fires to spread. The reason is that most tropical forests in the Amazon forest is closed canopy. So, of course, there is lightning, but it's closed canopy. And in the Amazon forest, only 4% of solar radiation reaches the forest floor. Also, the dry season is very short. There is rain even during the dry season. So the soil is very wet year-round. So also, unlike tropical savannas or mid-latitude weather system that produce a lot of lightning, the rainfall systems in the Amazon, they have what we call a green ocean cloud, meaning the clouds over the ocean, they are lower, shallower, so there is fewer lightning strikes. So the Amazon forest is also evolved, the meteorology evolved, so there is less But also when there is a lightning, it strikes, starts a fire, but the organic material, the litter, the trunks are so wet year-round. Fires propagate only for a few meters. So this is an ecological evolution over tens of millions of years. And that's really very essential for the highest biodiversity. Tropical forests have the highest biodiversity because fire was not a natural element in the evolution. And when there was a very severe drought, let's say in the Amazon, they are caused by El Nino. So yes, there might be a larger scale fire, sometimes 20,000 square kilometers, but a very strong drought caused by El Nino would happen only once every 1 century, 2 centuries. So the forest would have sufficient time to regenerate, affected by fires. So, okay, this is the forest. Unfortunately, wildfires are increasing a lot in the Amazon. Why is that happening? This is all human-made. Unlike Australia, Western US, and many, Europe, Mediterranean, Africa, most of Africa except the tropical forest. In the tropical South America, over 95% of the fires are human-made because fire are used to the extension of the agriculture, mostly livestock farming, mostly pastures for cattle. That in the Amazon, what's going on, we are seeing an increase in wildfires in the forest. As I said, the forest is very stable, but what's happening is, of course, climate change has an impact because we are seeing all over the planet increase in the frequency of extreme droughts. For instance, in the Amazon, related to El Nino, we used to have one drought, more severe drought every 2 decades. Now we had 2005, 2010, 2015, 16, 2020. Severe droughts, only 2015, 16 related to El Nino. 2005, 10, and 20 related to warmer tropical North Atlantic. And I don't know how many of you saw Joran Rockström making this talk yesterday about tipping points. So this warmer tropical North Atlantic is related to the melting of ice, Greenland. So it's a tipping point of the Earth system, so it's becoming more frequent fires in the Amazon. But still, most fires are human-made. So what we are seeing in the Amazon increasing tremendously from 2003 to 2018, we had 150,000 square kilometers of forest burn. So this is mostly, associated with frequent droughts, but mostly human-made, and that has to do with the edge effect. Cattle ranchers still use fire, so the fire escapes. When they are regrowing the pasture, they use fire, so the fire escapes the edge effect and propagates through the forest floor. So degradation, areas degraded is increasing tremendously. For instance, the Amazon has 6.5 million square kilometers of forest. We have more than 1 million already degraded. 1 million deforested, 1 million degraded. So that's what is taking place. So we are seeing year after year an increase in wildfires in the Amazon, which did not happen for millions of years. So this is a big threat to the survival of the forest and the biodiversity. I just finished by saying the southern, I've been doing research on that for 33 years. We published it in 1990 in Science, a first paper indicating that deforestation would drive most of the Amazon we call savannahization, meaning the forest would become a degraded savanna, tropical savanna, because the dry season, which is very short, 3 months or less, it would become 6 months long. But that was a prediction 33 years ago. Now we are seeing the southern Amazon from the Atlantic all the way to Bolivia, 2.3 million square kilometers, is very, very close to this tipping point of becoming a degraded, open canopy degraded ecosystem. And of course, open canopy degraded ecosystem, fires become also more frequent with lightning strike ignited fires. So we are seeing that very close to this tipping point. So that's a big risk. And then, of course, also the southern portion of the Amazon, unlike most forests in the planet, has becoming a carbon source. I'm not talking about emissions by fire or by deforestation. I'm talking about the forest is losing carbon because it became really highly degraded. So that's what I would like to say, you know, how to use artificial intelligence. Now it's not a natural fire, a lightning strike, ignited fire, but humans are making the fire. How to use artificial intelligence.
Absolutely, and we'll come back to that question in a moment. But Dr. Foley, in Australia, fire's actually important for your forest. So that's a completely different scenario from the one Carlos was just.
That's right. Bushfires are part of the Australian ecosystem. Many flora require to have their seeds germinated by having a fire go through that. And it might be interesting to know that the Indigenous people in Australia have been traditionally understanding the land management practices for 60,000 years and really do understand how they have been able to manage this. So up till, you know, I guess we're seeing the increase in the potential ferocity of fires and also the increased numbers because of climate change. What we're seeing is, and we're really only beginning to learn from our First Nations people, that their practice of cool burning, which I think is something you were sort of talking about before, has been used for centuries. And what they've done is develop mosaic patterns, and they've got their knowledge of how to do this so that the fire scars early in the fire season, and it reduces the vegetation load and hence the potential of catastrophic fires later in the season. And what's being done now is using artificial intelligence in tandem with the satellite-derived data so that you can demonstrate the effectiveness of these practices and demystify the practice and be able to optimise the cool burning processes, knowing that you can really only, in a country the size of Australia, really only do a practice which is about 1% of the forest area per year because it's just such a big effort to do that. And being able to identify the optimisation of that process based on that Indigenous original knowledge which extends for such a long time with a long history, and overlay that the changes with which we're seeing because of climate change, that then all comes together in a way which AI is going to be a major part of the solution.
And Dr. Foley, we were talking about humans setting fires in the Amazon. Is that true in Australia?
No, well, it's very rare that a bushfire is started by anything other than lightning strikes. And the reason for that is that if a fire is lit by an arsonist, which often a young child, or sometimes actually unfortunately firefighters who sort of lose it a little bit and do the wrong thing because they like fires, but they're usually done near residential areas or areas where there are people, and the biggest issue, and so they can get put out rather quickly, so that the arson type fires is not the big issue for us, it's actually lightning strikes.
And so, obviously, what we're seeing across the world is different ways in which fires are set. And so we have to have different approaches to solving that. So one of the things that we are thinking about for the next stage of this project is how do you model human behavior? And we know that using satellites, we can drill down on what people are doing But equally, there are ethical issues about following our citizens round and looking at what they're doing. And so I just wanted to raise that question with you, Carlos, because, you know, more than 95% of these fires are set by humans. How do you see that trade-off between the ethics of following people and trying to mitigate the burning compared to the loss that you're seeing in the Amazon?
Yes, this is not a simple question, but in tropical South America, a lot of the fires are arson, because unfortunately, more than 95% of fires of deforestation in the Amazon is illegal. In tropical South America as well. And for instance, in 2020, we had record-breaking fires in the wetlands in central South America, which we call Pantanal. And 98% of the fires were human-made. Most were arson, because it's illegality. This is people trying to really take some natural areas, some conservation units. So in that sense, and also in the Amazon, most of the deforestation is illegal. And of course, this forest degradation, wildfires in the forest, they are associated also, there's arson. People set fire in the forest, degraded forest, to open more areas. So in that sense, because in tropical South America is so much controlled by the, in fact, organized crime. Organized crime exploded in the last years in the Amazon. So I don't see much of an ethical issue here, because any way to prevent where fires might happen, where arson might happen, I think it's solid, it's okay. There is no ethical issue here in South America. I'm not going to say in other parts, in other biomes, but in tropical South America, particularly in the Amazon, I would say if we can find artificial intelligence, for instance, a lot of fires, forest fires in the Amazon are associated with illegal roads. There are more than 1 million kilometers of illegal roads in the Amazon. So if you have artificial, illegal roads, you measure by satellites, etc., and then you make a prediction with artificial intelligence, and I'm not a scientist of artificial intelligence, then I think it might be interesting to see the probability of a fire starting.
That's I think, a universal approach, and that is that there's going to be ignition points for a range of reasons, from whether it's illegal roads, whether it's the landform, whether it's a build-up of leaf litter in dry areas, and then also understanding what the ignition points are. In the case, it may be a drive for organised crime, and that intelligence agencies working in with that might be another way of getting information, and that uses a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning to understand where the threats are, through to when you look at the opportunities of landform, being able to identify from the weather that's happening where is the most likely place where we can send out drones or get satellite information and be able to identify fires quickly, because one of the things that has been recognised is that we can no longer work on the practices that have been used in the past, and that is that unless a fire, in the past it was if a fire was going to threaten human life, bio areas which we want and environments we want to preserve, or infrastructure, then we just let it burn out. And in the 2019 and 2020 fires in Australia, which just by the way covered an area about 3.6 times the area of Switzerland. So it wasn't in any one place, but across the continent. So that was a very big lot of fires, which were different individual ones came together and became mega fires. We can no longer use that method. Being able to extinguish a fire within 20 minutes is something which means you've got to be able to detect quickly and then have the resources in place to be able to put it out. We heard at one of the events earlier this week where San Diego's got some private sector engagement in that, looking at fires, in this case around built infrastructure for, from electricity supply, and that's often a place which unintended fires can start. So they've got the ability to have cameras and surveillance and be able to identify that, and they have been able to show that works in real time. So working out what the way of priority areas, having methods to be able to then identify how you can get that quick detection, and then also the follow-up and extinguishing them will have to become universally an approach globally, and we have to identify the breadth of areas, but you'll find there'll be substructures or infrastructure or techniques with using machine learning and artificial intelligence to allow that to happen in a global sense. But we need to have it stitched up across the globe.
Absolutely. And just thinking back to Indigenous stewardship, Dr. Foley talked about the Indigenous stewardship in Australia. I'm assuming that would be similar in the Amazon, but perhaps you could talk to that.
Yes, it's very interesting. Indigenous stewardship. The humans different than Australia, but they got to the Amazon 12,000 years ago. And when Europeans came to the Americas 500 years ago, there were in the Amazon about 8 to 10 million indigenous people. So it's not a very small population. Of course, at that time, indigenous practices, they use fire for having agricultural land. Part of their food systems were agricultural land. But interestingly, the indigenous people in the Amazon, they keeping the forest standing was a philosophical, cultural, and religious value. So they use fire, open up a small area for agriculture. They would keep agriculture for 15, 20, 25 years maximum. They would abandon, and then the forest will regenerate. And ecologically speaking, secondary forests in the tropics, they grow very, very fast. Very, very fast. After you abandon, in a few years, the secondary forest, tree species, they grow 7, 10, 15 meters. So they protect the soil. So that was an indigenous culture for 12,000 years. It's interesting now, there are about 2.2 million indigenous people living in the Amazon. They are not using fire anymore because fire became such a threat that fire is not the indigenous people doing. Us, the others, the cattle ranchers, all the organized crime, that now they're starting really to do agriculture but not to use fire anymore. So there, in fact, many indigenous people, they are learning how to do agriculture without fires. So because still they maintain this philosophical, cultural, religious value, which is keep the forest standing.
Thank you. And so we're coming to the end of our time together, but I'm wondering, Cathy, in terms of long-term AI strategies and a public-private approach to management of wildfires around the world, we've heard that obviously the problems are very different around the world. But is there room for some sort of coalition of best practices, thinking about AI tools that could be used for the future, do you think?
Well, first of all, AI tools need lots of data. And to get that data, you need to capture it, you need to curate it, you need to have standards, and you need to manage the different ecosystems of data that everyone has. So being able to share that data and being able to use it is a first step. The next is also recognising that we're seeing countries that have never thought about wildfires as being important to them. It's becoming a top priority because we know economically they have extraordinary impacts on, in Australia, I think it's the cost is $38 billion a year is the cost of wildfires in Australia. and by 2060 we're expecting it to be about $73 billion a year. So that means that there's a real economic imperative to get this right. But not every, and so if we don't do this, you may as well make a bonfire of money and just set a light to it. So we all know that every country is under stress with trying to manage their debt and their finances, and particularly for developing countries that where this is a new threat for them, or low GDP countries or countries with lots of debt, this is something we need to work together on. And what we've heard is that there's a lot of work happening in and around the world, bringing in the different perspectives of the environment that they're coming from, and stitching this up and having it in a way which will allow us to have some sort of international approach will be a way to be also efficient, effective, and be able to deliver solutions very quickly. I know that there's philanthropic organisations looking at this as well as governments. There's one of them which I just draw attention to is the Minderoo philanthropic organisation that comes out of Dr. Andrew Forrest's business, and they're planning to have a X-Prize Wildfire launch, which is going to be a grand challenge, an international grand challenge. It's not launched yet, but there is a website, and this is the sort of thing which I think will help garner things, and being able to have organisations like the World Economic Forum as a driver to really coordinate will, I think, be a major part of making this come together.
Thank you very much. And working together is something that is a passion of the World Economic Forum. And what more important thing could we work on than helping with wildfires around the world?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Dr. Foley and Dr. Nobre, for being with me today.
Thank you.
Pleasure, Kay.